Everybody, welcome back to the Jeep Journals, and today is Tuesday, and I'm headed to Friedrich Wilderness area. I'm looking forward to editing and showing you the footage I got from Big Bend, and so much so that you might have already seen this by the time, and by this I mean the Big Bend footage, by the time you see this film. This video. Whichever the case might be, I wanted to share a thought that I had just now, which is that I realized that for every amount of good that I want to do, then there must be somebody out there wanting to do something bad, just as equally well. And because of this, because there has to be balance, it might be possible that the worst is yet to come. Because if I'm doing the best I can to showcase joy and positivity while remaining steadfastly serious to tell you that there is a higher power that we can give pause to, that we can actually give thanks to, and that we might do more than just consider giving thanks to. In fact, with reverence, maybe we consider the necessity of giving thanks to one another, giving thanks to a higher power, giving thanks to arriving at our destination, giving thanks to the traffic that shows up next to you, that challenges your patience. Sometimes it can be difficult to give thanks to circumstances. However, as a child, or having a childlike mind, I should say, we can think differently. Who was that person that talked about thinking differently? The one that created all those jobs? There are so many little synchronicities to even the very name that some of us have. In my particular circumstance, in my past, I was named after a generational thought. And then I started to think differently. And as I thought differently and began to recognize and respect and give thanks for that which was around me, I began to realize that maybe there were people in my very midst who are just as not so open-minded towards the well-being of everyone else as I used to be. That level of thought, what I'm trying to say is, there was a time when I went to Big Bend National Park in 1993, and my video sounded like some gangster punk who was seeing all this wildlife for the first time. And when I saw it, the persona that I was at that point would say something like, "Holy that's effing this, that, or the other." And it wasn't until later, especially as I noticed the decline in wildlife, it wasn't until later that I began to recognize that I absolutely valued that wildlife and plant life and all life so much that I would regard it as something almost as if it were from a higher power. And in this mix of expert driving versus driving where people don't yield to one another, there is balance, because somebody might have had an accident under the same circumstances of driving if they were lesser skilled, lesser aware even, because I didn't know everything the moment I started driving. It took me a couple of accidents to really learn the boundaries of the laws of gravity, because that's really all we're up against. Vehicles, these time machines that we're in, take us from point A to point B on 4 pieces of rubber inflated by air, which is the grip. Basically, the rubber is the grippiest part that can adhere to the asphalt that we currently ride along, almost without thought, effortlessly. So effortlessly that some are able to drive with everybody else because it's not too complex. And as long as at least one person is participating properly, most accidents can be avoided. Now, the reason I talk about awareness and how deep our conversations go without rambling is because I want you to imagine for a moment that you're in a different country that's currently being shelled. And you're being moved from one residence to another. You don't have those convenience items. There was a catastrophe, whether it was shelling or an eruption or anything that caused us to have to team up with somebody else. Imagine, just for a moment, that if there's someone who wants to do good for the whole group, that there's also someone in that group who only is looking out for themselves so much that they will blatantly pretend that they are who you think they are. It's very difficult to disprove someone's persona, especially if it can fluctuate back and forth. So in my particular case, in this experience that I'm having, I've told you about the generational thought that I was named after, and how that generational thought that it was okay to strike their children, even to the point where if law didn't exist, they would actually strike their children even more. So what I'm telling you is a story that allows you to ponder, what if there is an equal and opposite force from you? You're watching this probably because you have good intention in your heart. And in your heart, you know you have good intention because you want this message of positivity to succeed, to flourish. You need it. We all do. We all need a positive message. We all need joy. We all need it. And we start to wonder, what is joy? What is that positive message and energy? Where is it coming from? Is it a higher power? Why is it that when someone else believes in me, I can do better? And then you got to ask, is it only my ego that's thinking this? Or can my humble spirit that recognizes the traffic next to me as my brother, who might not be as aware for whatever reason, but is it not my duty to do everything I can to say, hey, you're doing pretty good? And don't forget, when you have a yield sign, you know, or when there's a merging pattern, sometimes it helps for us to assimilate those patterns. That's to get the heart going. Or maybe it's a good squeeze to the whatever regions that you need it to be squeezed in. To understand, we can use words, we can use imagery, we can use whatever we need to use to share the good news. The thing that we need to be concerned with at all times is whether or not we care to share good news any longer. In some cases, the news that we're sharing, it's worse than fake news. It's worse because it's real. It's real news. And it's real news that have no positive, lasting value whatsoever compared to actual, actionable, quantifiable action. So when you come to this channel wondering what we're talking about, you know what we're talking about. I put my hands in the ocean and prayed to God and asked for something that I could use as jewelry. How do we think differently? I was given this from the ocean by praying. Today I saw something from a presenter named Derek Prince. And Derek Prince suggested that we meditate on prayer. Here, I was at a three-way intersection, stop signs all the way around. I don't fully know if the car to my right had come to a complete stop previously or not. However, it was a full stop situation for everyone involved, and I was given the opportunity to carry this positive message despite making a mistake, an error. And we make errors, and the only thing is, can we admit to it or not? If we can't admit to it, it's very likely that we're of the subset where we could be dangerous to other people because we are not fully in control. There is a thing that is hiding something from coming to light. And that thing can be thought, and usually that thought lends itself to thoughts of challenge. For an example, I'm backing into this spot and I was challenged to remember the subject I was talking about. This whole subject is challenging to me because, as I've mentioned, in order to restore health, sometimes it takes a full disconnect from anything which is unhealthy. And it's possible that as our adult mind progresses, it is automatically locked down to certain concepts because we've already known that for this amount of time, this is what keeps us safe. So why is it that we're seeking out positive words, tolerating, this must be the blasphemy? Have we ever heard the lyrics to the songs that we're criticizing? Have we ever considered the enemy for once? Have we ever considered at the same level that there's a higher power? Otherwise, why is there a positive and negative force in the world? And why is there the collective conscious awareness that says, this is wrong? And yet it continues. And it continues to escalate. Some of us continue to watch the entertainment even far long after it's entertaining any longer. At a certain point, what if I wanted to go back to Big Bend as my former child self and capture that beauty as a non-aggressive teenage boy who was following in the ways of our fathers? And what if I began to give credit to the Our Fathers that were being meditated upon? That's what I was talking about. There was a presentation I was watching. I think his name is Derek Prince. And Derek Prince was talking about meditating on prayer. There are certain conflicts, emotional conflicts and questions that cause people to hear the word meditation and become angry. For the same reason, I hesitate just briefly to point out when we become angry at words. For an example, purgatory. When we get angry at images, for an example, of a mummy's torso. When we get angry at words, we can no longer tolerate it at a certain point, to the point where we can hear the message. Do you remember as a child when your parent yelled at you for something? Did you hear all of the things they told you? Were you fully present? Because, whoa, what just happened? At a certain point as adults, I believe what happens is the second that we think someone is yelling at us for something that's probably correct, we tune out, already having made a decision, but never having heard the other person's content. Sort of like if you play a rock song for someone who doesn't appreciate rock and roll music. They're not going to hear the words. Even if you've got a beautiful voice, even if you have a beautiful voice that sounds like it could be in an amphitheater with the falsetto or whatever the reverberation that this individual can carry out a song with. Even if you have a beautiful voice, you won't hear the story about how the Native Americans were overrun by visitors from the outside. You'll never hear that story. And since you'll never hear the story, the lesson never will actually have been integrated, assimilated from that quote-unquote shadow self. So what I'm proposing to you is that if you yourself can't hear somebody else tell a full story, it's possible it's because there's a part of your story that you're not accepting for yourself. So when you fully accept peace, first thing you have to do is accept yourself, And to accept yourself, you have to understand that there was probably some great knowledge that led to this type of insight. And so then you look to the stories and you verify, you do your homework. Is there a situation in the Bible, for an example, where it talks about peace? Yes or no? Who was talking about it? Can I possibly just say, hey, with reverence, the fact that I am at peace, my God, how could I want anything more? And I don't. On Thursday of last week, at 10:30 p.m., I left San Antonio, Texas. I got to Big Bend at 5:55 in the morning. And during that whole drive, there were surprises abound. I saw a ringtail. I saw an elk. I could have sworn I saw a migrating bear, but that was only shortly after I had switched to my spotlights mode. And there are so many things in nature that it could have just been a giant wild hog. But no matter what it was, I saw a lot of life. And then basically, right before I drove up into the basin, I saw a shooting star. And that shooting star was a beautiful golden copper. And it was going across the sky at a rate that I thought it must be an airplane traveling at high speed. And it wasn't an airplane. It was a shooting star. Beautiful, bright, coppery gold color. I'd never seen one this color before. So I saw a shooting star. I saw a few jackrabbits. I basically drove up into the basin. I got there before sunrise, just like I had hoped to, how I had planned to, how I had bugged out to do. And from there, I wanted to challenge myself and see, is it possible to do an all-day hike and still get back to San Antonio as a simple day trip? And of course, it's not the simplest thing. It takes endurance. It takes practice, repetition, mindfulness, awareness, a lack of fear, a childlike spirit to do something like this. So what I did was I took my Big Bend Chaco footwear. Since I'd been walking Friedrich Park here in sandals, I've talked about this for quite some time. I've talked about why I do it. I've talked about how it ties into wellness and conservation. And I've continued to talk about these things while telling you this very intricate story, which is happening right now. And the reason I'm telling it in this way is so that we can appreciate the level of concentration it took to bring you what I brought you. So I saw the shooting star. I drove up into the basin, got there before sunrise, and I had, because we now have signal in the basin, just so you guys know, anyone who hasn't been to Big Bend in a long time, we've got wireless surfing speed connections up there for whatever reason. And at the same time, it must have been, it allowed me to check what time is sunrise going to be, because I hadn't really been fully paying attention to what time sunrise was during the former week. And it said about 7:48 from what I recall. And so that meant I had over 2 hours to sleep if I wanted to. Well, I wanted to make sure to make time for a bathroom stop when I woke up. And so I woke up about 2 hours later, and I made a quick bathroom stop and made sure my hair was, tied back properly so it wouldn't just be flying in my eyes during the windy hike. And I basically got to it. So I started walking the trail just prior to 7 in the morning. And even though it wasn't, officially sunrise, it was dawn enough for me to see the trail. It was pretty chilly. It was brisk, but I knew I would heat up quickly. And so I took a scant amount of layering. So I walked a distance, found a spot, took off a layer, kept walking. And this was in my sandals, kept walking. Eventually, I saw my first wildlife. But before that, I saw my first several pieces of trail debris, which included plastic water bottle cap, which I include in another video in this segment. When you watch it, you'll understand. It's like, man, this, it's true what he's saying. Of course it's true. How do we integrate this information? How do we get the people who are doing good to become? And then you have this mental connection where it's like, what if this is the best I can do? Because if I get really good at helping the world change its direction, there's going to be a lot of really bad change in the direction too. And what's happening in this world as we become more aware, what's happening as our dreams and nightmares are coming true, what is happening? How would prayer or meditation work for that? And how would one of those two words cause such anger? Those are the questions that you've got to really consider on these channels. When you're watching something, is there something being sold to you? Is it being told to you, or is it being discussed with you? On this channel, the signs, even the military form of signs that fly over, That's a manifestation of a reality. In someone's reality, that's the sign. Whether it's the sign of the cross or the sign of gratitude, even a child can understand these things. So I tend to believe when people ask me about spirituality and timing and lead us not into temptation and deliver us from evil, when I talk about this, I believe it. And because I believe it, to touch on that subject can sometimes bring about the most interesting conversations. Not a lot of people are deep thinkers in that same way, where they would include the same thought that we're talking about here. So, if you've never been to Big Bend, the next thing that happened was after I got past the water bottle cap, I saw a buck, beautiful buck, and it walked right in front of me on the trail. And it was only after I had acknowledged it, while it waited to see if I could acknowledge it. It was standing still, quite a distance ahead, looking at me. And once I stopped and almost in reverence gave this beautiful buck the acknowledgement that I was there, it continued its path, which was going to be right in front of me. So this buck walked right in front of me, knowing that I was there, knowing that I was staying still, giving thanks to it, thanks for it. And the buck continued on in its peaceful way. There was a mutual awareness, which I've experienced with snakes, with lizards, with roadrunners, with people. And in many cases, as you hear me trying to tell this peaceful story and how beautiful it is in Big Bend, you sometimes, especially on this segment and other segments, you see the different noises that cause me hesitation. It's the concentration that someone sometimes requires absolute silence in order to carry a thought for a long time. It's why a lot of people, when someone around them starts talking, they're like, I forgot what I was going to say. And then there's an anger. It's because there's a point. The point is, we all know that things are true, but the ego wants to get its 2 cents in. And the 2 cents is the discounted value, which has no bearing, no understanding, no concept as to whether or not the full story was ever assimilated. That's a dangerous concept. So anyway, the buck walked past. I continued on my journey, and then as I got more and more into the South Rim Loop, and I went up via the Pinnacle side, I saw destruction from the fires that happened this last year in the basin. I saw a lot of burnt trees. I saw some signs of life. The plants are coming back. One of the unusual things that I did not see, which I had almost always seen forever, was rock squirrels, or any squirrels. I saw one lizard. There were no paw prints of bears. There were plenty of hoof prints from deer, and I did see several deer. And I also saw a couple of butterflies, a few varieties of bird, mostly the Mexican jay. Second only to that was the acorn woodpecker. I saw an oriole of some sort. And I got to the South Rim. As I crested Pinnacles, we're just hopscotching around. As I crested Pinnacles, the sun was at that same around that same time cresting that mountain slope. So I would basically arrived at the top with the sun. The sun helped because walking uphill and all that cold caused my skin to feel super cold, especially because I had sweat on the way up. Even though I had reduced my layers. Once the sun started hitting me at that altitude with that clarity, just like it is on a clear day like today, it started to feel kind of hot. In fact, if you were to look really close in person today, I had some drying skin from the exposure, from the sun exposure. If you watched any of the other clips, you'll understand I try not to go out of my way to acquire more bottles of stuff, especially if I'm not using it frequently enough to ever have put the product to use. The last thing I should be doing is buying a volume-sized, discounted product only to use a fragment of it before it becomes brittle, hard, dried out, decayed, and useless. Can't the same be said of a lot of life? Like, for an example, if I had the ability to walk, shouldn't I go and do that before I become unable to do those things? Temporarily or long term, whatever the choice we might decide to make. A lot of what we talk about here is just basic honesty, basic truth, basic awareness. And the reason I do that is because I've had to spend a lifetime for my first 44 years, actually, tending to a situation that I had not even caused. Isn't that the thing we're presented with today, right now, in this world? All of us. We're all trying to figure out, how do we resolve this situation that I myself did not create? Well, the first important thing is, if I see a lot of bottle caps in my local trails and my not so local trails, first thing I want to do is, why am I ever going to buy something that has this to begin with? Just so you know, today I saw on this same platform on YouTube, it was like Handyman's Tips or something. Someone basically screwed a bottle cap to a piece of plank of wood, and they torched the bottle cap and used it for sealing the soldered part of a wire that they had just soldered. So imagine, if you don't have any of those heat shrink tubes, that's a great idea. It's brilliant. You know, the whole world can share these ideas, and that's what YouTube is about. That's why I'm so happy for this platform. That's why I've moved everything off of the other platforms. There are plenty of platforms that can take up all kinds of time, and like the cat up the road says, I ain't got time for that. Who got time for that? Who has time to continuously unsubscribe from billions of things? Even I was unsubscribed from over and over, even on fan bases where the mutual topic, music, was something worth discussing. Apparently it was worth less to discuss those things fully because there was some word. Was it purgatory? There was some image. Was it a snake? There was some thought. Was it a higher power? What is the real thought that's causing us to hesitate from thinking about positivity? The things that I'm curious about when I open these topics up for discussion is how closed everyone becomes. In most cases, there are some brave people that they'll participate to a point where there are some inner thoughts that come out, some inner pasts that come out. That's assimilation. And as we assimilate with one another and recognize the clarity, as we recognize how close we're coming to the mind that needs entertainment all the time, we start to recognize who's listening to the birds on the trail. Are there any birds on the trail? The things that we start to recognize coming into our own proximity are the same things that try to trip us up. So, the words of peace are very simple. They go like this. They go, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from evil. Those are words of peace. Every sentence individually, if you just look it up, is about as challenging as hearing the word purgatory. How cool. This van next to me is an E-van of some sort. It's a Chrysler, and I can hear it. It's just all electric. I should say I can't hear it. It's all electric. So it's super cool to see these things happening, and to know the bottle caps that are on the trails, we can use those as soldering components. We can do so many things with all the plastic that's out there right now. But who are the workers and job creators that are going to create these jobs? And how are we going to have the funds? How are we going to have the fun to do it? Is it going to be fun? Are we going to give thanks to the opportunity from all of the situations that are happening overhead and elsewhere? Are we going to give that acceptance a chance? Or are we going to continue to remain divided in our conversations? For me, the choice is clear. For some people, it might be a little bit challenging. But as we see one another, truly see one another over and over, we start to recognize the truth. We don't even have to try. When we are carrying out that which is right. There may be many interruption opportunities that present themselves, and those things that continue to befuddle us get to the point where we either understand something's wrong, something is wrong with me. It's not that person, even though they don't seem to associate with hardly anybody. It's not that person. It's not that person giving thanks, saying that signs come from overhead, even in the form of military jets, dropping bombs even on locations that don't deserve it. That was another segment I saw today on YouTube. It was described how many incidents had happened recently which were not fully investigated. And so a news journalist went and investigated these situations and found many more civilians were being harmed than the military, many more civilians were being harmed than the military was giving credit to having been harmed. The numbers were being inaccurate. I don't necessarily find that there's a blame to place, as much as I do find that maybe there is a question that could be answered. If we know that things are wrong, is it a conspiracy or a theorist's job to bring that to anyone's attention and say, I'm seeing a lot of these on the trail, so maybe I should buy no more of this particular type of product until someone gets it right. Let's think about trash as cash. Right now, there's a lot of cash laying around. There are things exploding in the world right now. And we can see that clean water can only be transported in a number of meaningful ways. Maybe there's a need for both of these things to exist. Having this product and also not having it so willy-nilly, so used in a way that it's not giving reverence to it. These are important products that have been manufactured during our lifespan. And it's important that we not only pay, but pay attention. We're paying for all of these things, both in the short term and in the long term. So anyway, this channel, it talks about a lot of things. The most interesting things that I think that we talk about sometimes just have to be understood from a deeper level where we give credit to life. If I suggest that I got to walk with some of this wildlife because I gave it an awareness, and if that buck walked past me because I was aware of it, rather than bolting when it could have, if it saw that I was careless about it, that I didn't even see it. I've seen this happen with a lot of animals. And not every animal, of course, from any species has the exact same temperament. Perhaps, much like people, we've all had experiences that have changed our future realities to the point where when somebody talks, even at a certain pitch, we forget. We don't hear what the whole message is. We accuse somebody of lying. And we can't ever hear the details that would allow for any truth to be considered because there's no third party that's listening in on the conversation until you add a third party. This is the struggle that I've had with one of the generational thoughts that we've had in our past. And by our past, I mean collectively. We've all got some kind of thing to overcome. It's what we're here for. When we help each other out, it's so much more easy to overcome those traumas. Because it's a lot more awe-inspiring and confidence-inspiring when you walk with someone that says, look, I understand exactly what that bear is thinking. I do not want it to cause either of us damage, so I'm going to do everything I can to respectfully come to a mutual sense of consideration. Again, this isn't something that your average textbook professor will teach you. It's not even something that any ranger will necessarily admit to. But beyond a certain point of encounter, it's not all, oh, I'm just going to use my gun. I've got a concealed carry permit. Oh, I'm just going to wrestle it. Whatever incredulous thing comes to the ego to be just regurgitated out. The first thing to go back to is, did we hear the whole message? If a bear came out and looked very concerned, looked around for maybe its other company, and you were very agitated yourself, and you made noises that upset the other company, like let's say a bear's cubs, you might have an encounter, a serious encounter. Close encounter of the turd kind, where you turd in your pants. I don't know why, but some of these situations just don't scare me. What scares me is people. And it's people because of what originally was my real life nightmare. I've talked about it here plenty. There are even some people, let's get back to the story about Big Bend real quick, and this will tell its story. It'll tell it on its own. So I hiked the South Rim, saw the devastation from the fires, still saw the pools of insects here and there. And although everything was diminished, there weren't as many things as there were before, to include, I didn't see any rock squirrels. It's a little different. But again, there was hardly any prey. So at about 4:20, I got back to the trailhead, back to where my vehicle was. I mean, I had plenty of time to get down to the visitor center and check in and get my visitor pass. So I got my visitor pass. I mailed some postcards, some letters. Responded to a text message. Saw that I had another update about another thing that I don't know if I can make it. I don't know how much I support repairing technology. That there has to be a better way to use technology in business. There has to be a better way that makes more sense to all of us, especially in these times of need. There has to be a better way to appropriate our work staff so that actual work is completed, so that when we walk the trails, we don't have all this residual trash, residual cash laying around waiting to be picked up. There has to be a better way. Anyway, responded to some of the messages I could respond to. And then I decided to go home because after that long walk, I was pretty sore. I felt like going home would give me a great amount of time to quickly recover and then get back to what it is that I do, which is I'm about to walk the nature area here in town after having done this extreme walk just this past Friday. So, and it's Tuesday now. Took me a couple of days to recover and feel like I could do it. Here I'm going to do it. Today I'm going to be able to do it. It's going to be 70 something. Tomorrow it's supposed to be 70 something. The day after that's high is supposed to be like 45. And the overnight low is going to be in the 20s, maybe in the low 30s. This temperature fluctuation thing that's happening over and over may or may not be something that's noteworthy. I'll tell you what, though, if you're wildlife, it is noteworthy. So as an advocate for wildlife, I'm presenting this information in a way that says, hey, yeah, you're right. All of this that you're talking about is right. And since I had to, for 44 years, talk about this generational thing for so long already, let me tell you, that's a losing effort. And by losing effort, I mean, unless the other persons are willing to participate and to communicate fully, there's not going to be any change. So that's why I left some of the channels that I left. The social media, where there was no real social anything except for egocentric thought behavior and the reinforcement of that. Even this channel has the potential to create that same element. However, if you go out of your way to be just yourself, there are definitely a lot of people who will not go out of their way to ever talk with you ever again, which I kind of enjoy because it frees up my time to share this message of positivity. So I know there are other people out there that want to share this information. I know that we can have a lot more fun putting this stuff into maybe inspirational music. I know that we can heal together because I've felt it. The healing is coming back. You can see it. You can see me smiling more. You can't help but go back and listen to some of the songs that I've shared with you and understand those are actually good. Lyrically, they're great. This guy just needs to sing better. Maybe I'm not the singer. Maybe I'm just presenting this information saying, hey, these are possible solutions to our evolutions, to our revelations throughout time. These are just possibilities. But until we open our mind to any possibility, we're kind of stuck in a rut. And so that's why I decided to think like a child, think different, and do something different. And this is my attempt to do something different that I hope you are enjoying. I hope that you're subscribing. I hope that you're liking. I hope that you're sharing. I hope that you're understanding when I showcase the videos from 1993 from Big Bend. I was probably one of the few people who had a camcorder in high school, and I saved my money from work to get this. And I saved because it was the first time a color viewfinder had come out on a camcorder. What? A camcorder. It was this big giant thing with a flip open window and also a color viewfinder. Imagine the same technology that I had back then to capture what was being captured then, which was present then, which I used for wildlife, I now could have just carried in my pocket. Here's the kicker, people. Had I had this phone in my pocket back then, I would have run out of space for all of the things that I would have recorded. There was so much wildlife back then that we could walk on the window trail elevated wall. As a child, you would hop up on those little walls and walk on them. Little brick wall that's basically keeping you off of the vegetation. It might not be brick. I think it's stone. It's like stone, cemented stone. You could walk there and there would be javelina right on the other side of the wall. There would be deer walking through the parking lot. People perceived, and animals perceived that people were perceiving them. For that reason, you didn't have people just errantly striking other cars, other animals, other people in parking lots. You didn't have so much distraction that people couldn't yield into and merge into traffic properly. So for every goodness that people want to bring out, it's possible we're uncovering a lot of ill at the same time. But isn't that part of the exploration that we're here to experience at the same time? I say that as a dragonfly, a golden dragonfly flies by right in front of me. It kind of reminded me of a song that I thought that I had written already. I never really captured it. I mostly wrote down the words. And it was in my mind, it was going to be the song that really was so catchy that it made me want to sing it properly. And there was some reason that I didn't write it. Maybe at the time it just wasn't ready. Some things have to percolate a little bit. Maybe it's because of the inspiration that I'm receiving from across the channels. Again, I'm not on very many. So the people that are reaching out and the reasons you're reaching out, thank you so much. I'm glad we have the chance to interact. I hope that we're watching these segments here and understanding how we can leverage time, how we can learn faster together, how we can collectively and cohesively learn to solder with the materials that we have available literally at our feet. So that we can learn to overcome these challenges with joy. So that we can learn that there is joy. That, hey, even if you've done it this way for 44 years, I'm 45, baby. I barely have energy to deal with anything negative and hostile if it has no intention of changing. And what I mean by that is, as long as it's not being presented to me while I continue to use the simple words of peace that seem to have been leveraged in a textbook that so many people want to fight over, whether they've got it the right way or the wrong way, and not many people want to accept, hey, maybe we both have a way. Yahweh. I don't know, it just came to me. If that meant something to you, say something in the comments. For me, it all means something. Even that. For me, it looks like we're at about 55 minutes, 55 seconds. I'm going to start the countdown here because I don't want to take up much more than an hour of your precious time. All of the segments that you're watching, you're seeing a progression of a restoration of health, a progression of restoration of faith, a progression of restoration of peace. And by that, what I mean is across the board in all ways, not just for myself. This is a collective thing. And sometimes for that progression, there does need to be a little bit of review. We want to review the foundation. If the foundation isn't going to hold, what good's the rest of it? And if we can't have a conversation that comes to a consensus where we're on the same ground, well, that sounds like there's no foundation. So again, why are we building up anything? A lot of people will understand why it's difficult or easy to spend time with one another. And part of that is if we genuinely have joy, it's easy to share joy with one another. It's easy because it's free and it resonates and it rewards in return. Joy is something that must come from a higher power, which means that in contrast, the things that help erode, the things that are no longer necessary, however you might take that, are things that are going to be the opposite of joy. They're going to point us in a direction that says this is not the way. We should not be shelling this community, especially if we know from our relatives and friends and social media groups, some of this is not right. The numbers being reported for the casualties, it's not right. How can I follow orders blindly when people compared some eras to other eras recently because of political division? What is that entity that's here to kill, steal, and destroy? Is it known as the devil? Do we study anything? Do we study our adversary? Do we study one another? Do we study one another to understand and see enough, often enough, that there are just fewer and fewer people paying attention? If I was in the parking lot at Big Bend in the national park right now, up at the restaurant, as a child, even without cars having backup cameras and everything else, I was probably safer because traffic wasn't in such a hurry. I'm not in a hurry, and I move through the world as effortlessly as I can in this amazing time machine, in this amazing time with you amazing people who are journeying with me on this amazing adventure where we're just learning right now how to communicate. Thank you for joining the Jeep Journals. Thank you for visiting my blog, my website that talks about these things. Thank you for understanding and helping, especially those who are helping. This is a big thing to me, and all that you've helped me to do to showcase these situations and help us to remember what life was like and what life is like. As you've helped me to do this, we've of course helped other people, helped ourselves at the same time. And all of that is out of respect. So until next time, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time. Peace, love, and all that old school stuff.